Hello children, welcome to today's English class. Hope you all are safe, healthy and happy at home. And you have also read the part of chapter 4 of your prose text, A Truly Beautiful Mind, which we had read in the last class. And you might have also looked at the difficult words and tried to understand their meaning. So children, as I had discussed with you about the word genius and how Albert Einstein had become a genius, though he belonged to a very simple family. I had told you that he was the son of a salesman, and we had also discussed that for becoming genius it is not necessary to be born with talents and attributes. So, we had seen in the first 3 parts about how Albert Einstein was from a very simple background and what are the challenges he faced initially, and how his mother later supported him. Maybe initially the opinion of his mother, his teachers and the headmaster of the school was not very good, though we had learned that he was very good in studies, isn't it? He was born in Ulm of Germany, okay, and he was not able to speak properly even after he was 2.5 years old, okay, and his playmates called him boring brother. So his childhood went on like this. He was all alone, he played all alone without any friends. But from his childhood we had looked at the lesson that he was very much interested in playing with mechanical toys, isn't it? And that's why when his sister was born, he asked, where are her wheels? Okay, so that was young Einstein. Okay, and mother also thought that, you know, he was not normal like other children. And then later on when he went and joined school, though he was very good in studies, his headmaster said that you know, he is not going to be successful in his life. We had also seen that since the headmaster and the teachers of the school in which Albert Einstein studied did not have a very good opinion about him, also his opinion often clashed with his teachers. So he left the school for good. That means he left the school forever. And then the family moved to Milan, and then he continued his education there in a German speaking Switzerland school. And then we had also seen that he became very friendly with Mileva Maric, who had come from Serbia, and she was very intelligent, and both of them became very good friends. And Albert Einstein was dreaming of working together with Mileva Maric on the theory of relativity. And we had also seen that at the age of 21, after becoming a graduate, Albert Einstein worked as a technical assistant, and there he was supposed to assess the inventions and work of other people, but he secretly developed his own ideas, and he also called his office as the Bureau of Theoretical Physics, because he stored all his papers which he was preparing for his own inventions. And then we had also looked at his discovery of the theory of relativity. So children, today we will look at page 49 and 50. So children, as we are going to read page number 49 and 50 from your prose text, if you have your textbook, you can look into your textbook, and you can also look at the screen, and please listen carefully as we read this particular portion, and then we will discuss in detail about this part of the lesson. While Einstein was solving the most difficult problems in physics, his private life was unraveling. Albert had wanted to marry Mileva right after finishing his studies, but his mother was against it. She thought Mileva, who was 3 years older than her son, was too old for him. She was also bothered about Mileva's intelligence. She is a book like you, his mother said. Einstein put the wedding off. Here, unraveling means starting to fail, to become problematic. So, while Einstein was solving the most difficult problem in physics, he was working on the theory of relativity. Okay. At that moment, what happened? His private life was starting to fail. It was becoming problematic for him. Why it was becoming problematic, children? Because we know that Mileva Marek was a very good friend of Albert Einstein, and he wanted to marry her. Okay, the moment he finished his studies, but his mother did not agree for this. Now, why she did not agree for this, children? She had her own reasons. She thought Mileva was 3 years older to Einstein. Okay, and she also felt that she was too intelligent. Okay, so that also worried her. Children, we had seen that initially Albert Einstein's mother did not have a very good opinion about Einstein. She thought he is not normal. So now when she found that Mileva was too intelligent, so she felt maybe he is not a suitable match for her son. And she also felt that being too intelligent, she could not be a good housewife. So she did not agree for the marriage. The pair finally married in January 1903 and had 2 sons. But a few years later, the marriage faltered. Here faltered means became weak. Their relation was not very strong. Mileva meanwhile was losing her intellectual ambition and becoming an unhappy housewife. After years of constant fighting, the couple finally divorced in 1919. Einstein married his cousin Elsa in the same year. Okay. So now what happened? Though the mother did not agree in the beginning, the pair finally married in January 1903 and they also had 2 sons. But after a few years, their relationships started becoming weak. Okay. As we had learned that Mileva was too intelligent and she had her own ambitions. She was also an aspiring scientist. So she could not, fulfill her ambitions as a scientist. She felt being a housewife, she was not able to fulfill her ambitions. So they often fought amongst themselves. And after continuous fighting, finally they divorced each other, okay, in 1990. And then what happened? Einstein married his cousin Elsa in the same year. Now, Einstein's new personal chapter coincided with his rise to world fame. In 1915, he had published his general theory of relativity, which provided a new interpretation of gravity. An eclipse of the sun in 1919 brought proof that it was accurate. Einstein had correctly calculated in advance the extent to which the light from fixed stars would be deflected through the sun's gravitational field. The newspapers proclaimed his work as a scientific revolution. So, in the last para we had seen that his personal life was being disturbed, especially with regard to his wedding. He got married and divorced and then again he married. Now, After his second marriage, he rose to world fame, and in 1915 he published his general theory of relativity, and then which gave some new ideas on gravity. Children, Albert Einstein had predicted in 1915 that in 1919 there would be a solar eclipse, due to which there would be a change in the position of the stars to some extent, and his prediction came out to be true. It was accurate. Whatever he had predicted had become the reality, and due to which the newspapers proclaimed his work as a scientific revolution. Now Einstein received the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1921. You can see in the picture, children. He was showered with honors and invitations from all over the world and lauded by the press. Lauded means appreciated. His efforts were appreciated. Okay. So, he became very famous because of his theory of relativity, for which he received the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1921. And then later on he also received many honors, and he was also invited from all over the world. Children, famous scientists, Nobel laureates, they are invited to present their papers, to interact with children, to interact with aspiring young scientists, as their experience inspired other people also to come up with their own inventions. When the Nazis came to power in Germany in 1933, Einstein emigrated to the United States. 5 years later, the discovery of nuclear fission in Berlin had American physics in an uproar. Many of them had fled from fascism, just as Einstein had, and now they were afraid the Nazis could build and use an atomic bomb. Here, emigrated means to leave one's own country in order to settle permanently in another place. Okay. And in an uproar here means very upset. Okay. In your history textbook, you have a particular chapter about Nazism. I hope you might have learnt about that, and you can even look into your history textbook about the Nazi rule, about Adolf Hitler and his cruel rule, how he tortured the people, particularly the Jews, and how they were killed, about the gas chambers. Okay. So, you will read them in detail in your history text this year. Okay. And then here also this paragraph talks about fascism. Fascism, again you will be reading about Mussolini. Okay. Nazism, fascism, all this talks about how dictatorship ruled the world. One single person rising to power and trying to become or trying to rule the world, try to become more and more powerful. And then the people suffered a lot under dictatorship. Okay? Leaders like Mussolini, fascism, and leaders like Hitler, Nazism. Okay. So, in 1933, Germany came under the power of the Nazis. Since Einstein was already disturbed due to fascism, the rule of Mussolini, after Nazis came to power, he immigrated to the United States. And what happened 5 years later? The nuclear fission was discovered in Berlin. Nuclear fission means the process of making nuclear bombs or atomic bombs. Okay. So, when nuclear fission was discovered in Berlin, the physicists in America became very upset. Okay? Many of them had fled from fascism. Already they were disturbed by fascism, and even like Einstein, they were also afraid that the Nazis could build and use an atomic bomb. Children, you must always remember that science has made our life comfortable, and it has made our life fast. We are in the world of technology, where just by pressing a button, many of our work is done. But we must remember that any invention, any discovery has to be used for constructive purpose, not for destructive purpose. And here Einstein and other American physicists, they feared that this particular discovery, that is the nuclear fission, the nuclear bombs or the atomic bombs, could destroy the world. It could be destructive. Now, at the urging of a colleague, Einstein wrote a letter to the American President Franklin D. Roosevelt on 2nd August 1939, in which he warned a single bomb of this type exploded in a port might very well destroy the whole port together with some of the surrounding territory. His words did not fail to have an effect. The Americans developed the atomic bomb in a secret project of their own and dropped on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You can see in the picture, children. Now, when Einstein and other scientists got the news of the atomic and nuclear bombs being made in Berlin, they were greatly disturbed. Since Einstein was a good human being, he was concerned about humanity. He always loved peace, and he wanted mankind to be peaceful and united. So, since the use of the nuclear bombs and the atomic bombs could destroy the world, so a colleague approached Einstein and he asked him to write a letter to the American President. So, he wrote a letter to the American President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and on 2nd August 1939 he wrote this letter, in which he warned the American President, saying that a single bomb of this type exploded in a port. You know what is a port? Okay, a harbor. He said might very well destroy the whole port together with some of the surrounding territory. It would not only destroy the port, the entire port, but also the surrounding territory. And his words did not fail to have an effect. That means whatever he had said had an effect. Now, what happened, children? He wrote this letter to warn the American President that we must do something and stop the use of this nuclear weapons. But what happened? The Americans secretly developed this atomic bomb. Okay, and what did they do? They dropped these bombs in the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Children, let me take you back again to history, a very unfortunate event which happened in 1945 during the Second World War, when America had dropped these bombs in the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Children, lakhs of people were killed on the spot. And even today, if you have the habit of watching news, especially the history channels, you know, even today the effect can be seen in these two cities. The effect was so disastrous. Okay, it destroyed everything. Many people died, they lost their lives. Property, environment, resources, everything was destroyed. Children, war is always destructive. War never brings happiness. So, this is what Einstein did not want to happen. That is why he had warned the American president. But children, what did they do? They prepared these bombs in secret and they dropped it on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Okay. Now, Einstein was deeply shaken by the extent of the destruction. This time he wrote a public missive to the United Nations. In it, he proposed the formation of a world government. Unlike the letter to Roosevelt, the American president, this one made no impact. But over the next decade, Einstein got ever more involved in politics, agitating for an end to the arms build-up and using his popularity to campaign for peace and democracy. Einstein was deeply shaken by the extent of the destruction. When these bombs were dropped on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Einstein was deeply shaken, because as I told you, the destruction was, really very disastrous. So, this time he decided to write a letter not to the President of America, but to the United Nations. Okay. He wrote a public missive, a letter specially to which was long and official. So, he wrote this letter to the United Nations, and what did he propose in this letter? The formation of a world government. Okay. But unlike his letter to the American president, this letter had no impact. Nobody bothered about his letter and there was no action. But in the coming decade, that means in 10 years, Einstein got more involved in politics. Children, as such, he had become famous because of his theory of relativity, and he had also become by this time a Nobel laureate. Now, he decided to involve himself in politics. He thought maybe through healthy politics, he could change the world. He could bring peace and unity in the world. So, what did he do? He agitated against the use of these nuclear weapons and used his popularity to campaign for peace and democracy. He was against dictatorship, he was against the military rule. So, he campaigned. He believed since he was very popular, so his ideas would reach the people and maybe there could be a revolution, a change, because if you want to bring a change in the world, you have to be the change. So, he thought it was the people who could bring the change. So, he decided to campaign. Now, when Einstein died in 1955 at the age of 76, he was celebrated as a visionary and world citizen as much as a scientific genius. Visionary is a person who can think about the future in an original and intelligent way. Why Einstein was called as a visionary when he died in 1955 at the age of 76? Because he wanted a safe and secure future for people. He wanted science and the discoveries of science to be used for the betterment of the world, for constructive purpose and not for destructive purpose. So, he was a good human being and he fought for unity and peace. He was against the use of all these nuclear weapons, and so he raised his voice against this, And since he worked for peace and democracy and unity, after his death he was celebrated as a visionary, and he was also known as a world citizen. He was a scientific genius already, and now he was recognized as a world citizen. So, I hope children, page 49 and 50 is clear to you, and you might have looked into your textbook and the screen very carefully. Now, I would request you to read these two pages also very carefully, so that you comprehend the lesson. Children, just reading the text is not going to help you. You need to refer to other books related to the chapter. You can go online, you can find so many information about this great scientist, this Nobel laureate. Okay? So many videos are there. You can just go and have a look at them, and also note down some additional information, so that when you answer the questions related to this chapter, you become more creative, okay, with lot of information. And as I had told you earlier also, you can very well have a discussion in your science class too about this great scientist and his discoveries and his role in bringing peace and unity in the world. Children, now I would request you to look into your textbook and try to solve the exercise questions which are there at the back of the lesson. The first question here is, some headings have been given, okay, and you have to number them according to their paragraph. Okay. The lesson has been divided into 17 paras, and there are some headings which could suit these paras. So, what you have to do is read the headings carefully and then number the paragraph, write the number of the paragraph to which this heading could belong. Children, I had told you earlier also that while you are reading your text, you need to give headings to different paragraphs, so that it helps you to understand better and to jot down the points of the paragraph according to the heading. Okay. For example, Einstein's equation. This is from paragraph 9. So, you have to write 9 in front of that. Einstein meets his future wife. So, that is para 7, where he meets Mileva Maric. So, children, I would request you to go through the remaining headings and write down the number of the paragraph in front of that. And also there are some questions. For example, what did Einstein call his desk drawer at the patent office and why? He called it Bureau of Theoretical Physics. Why did he call it so? Because he secretly developed his own ideas there. He stored all his documents and papers there. Why did Einstein write a letter to Franklin Roosevelt, to the American president? We just discussed, because he was greatly disturbed by the development of this nuclear bombs, and he was afraid that if this bomb is used, it could be very destructive. Therefore, he wanted to warn the American president. Now, how did he react to the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki? How did he react? He was greatly disturbed, and then he decided to write a letter to the United Nations. Okay, and then later on he also decided to get into politics and work for peace and democracy. You can add your own ideas to these questions. And as you read the paragraphs, children, and write down their headings too, you can frame simple questions and try to find out the answers of these questions and write them down in your notebook. Writing them down is very important to improve your writing skills. Now, question number 8. Okay, here there are some facts from Einstein's life. Okay? You have to arrange them in chronological order. Okay? Which fact would come first, and then second and third and fourth and fifth. So, you need to go back to the lesson and then write down all these sentences in chronological order. So, I hope you would do these exercises so that you understand the chapter better. In the next class, I will meet you with a different topic. Until then, take care, stay safe, stay at home.